What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Pro v Pro. Obviously, this show is going to be a little different than most, talking a lot about Grayson Murray. Justin and I weren't even sure that we wanted to really have this conversation on the show. It's obviously not the most fun conversation to have. And then we saw throughout the weekend and even early this week in our PGA Discord just how many people seem to have like some kind of therapeutic reaction to being able to talk through it all with each other. Seeing that sense of community around this was pretty cool. And it showed us that, we can actually kind of help people on the show by telling some pretty cool stories about Grayson Murray. Both of us had our own run-ins with him, if you will, in our careers. And so a little bit of a unique perspective on it. And hopefully you guys take something pretty cool from this conversation. So Justin, I'll let you start us off. Talk to us about your experience with Grayson. Can you even say that you were friends with him? So let's hear it.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those deals for me, right? That he, so I met Grayson playing in Florida. We basically played against each other in matches for a week, right? So he's probably a 20, 21, 22-year-old kid at the time. Just a punk kid, right? Just a cocky, like I'm better than everybody, which he was really, really good, no doubt about it. I mean, it came to fruition, but so that was the only experience I had, and then you got to kind of see that develop into a career, and then so I always had that oh, he's just a cocky punk kid mindset about him, but I also knew he was super talented, and then you watched him grow up and go through struggles. I mean, he got scrutinized very often on Twitter because of the stuff that he said. And, he would get on there and say stuff probably when he was drinking. I mean, he said that was a huge problem for him that he grew out of. And then to see him come full circle into really his last interview after he won, just so much more mature and had figured life out, it seemed. I'm not going to speculate on what the cause was or what the trigger was, so to speak. Not necessarily the cause, but what the trigger was to make him go back into this depression and decide to take his own life is just heartbreaking because he seemed to have put things back together. So I think and then all these people, I mean, I got to play a ton with Harry Higgs when I had Canadian Tour status. We practiced at the same course. And, he's as genuine as they get. And to see that, if anybody hasn't seen that interview, I strongly suggest taking time to go find that and just listen to the things he says. And that's always kind of been the person that Harry is. So I think that what we're seeing is this golf community of, hey, even guys like Ben On, right? He made a comment about, hey, just because we had our spats in the past, how we got over those and how he got better and those kind of things. So I just think you're getting to see a lot of really cool golf community stuff.
Yeah. For those who aren't exactly sure what you're talking about with Harry Higgs there, all you have to do is search Harry Higgs victory speech. You'll see it. It's pretty phenomenal. My experience with Grayson was a pretty cool one. So this was probably my second or third event as a pro. I was the young guy. I was the smallest guy. I certainly wasn't the most confident yet in the golf world. And I get to a tournament on the G Pro Tour, I believe it was in North Carolina. And I'm warming up on the range. And the guy next to me, I hear the way the ball is coming off his club. And I watch him for a little bit, and he's just striping these towering long irons. And I'm watching him going, that guy's better than me. Like, I don't know how much better, but that guy is very clearly better than me. It's a pretty worrying feeling, right? Like, you don't know how you stack up against the rest of the competition. It was either my second or third event. I'm hoping that, I'm good enough to compete right away. I have no idea. So anyway, go through the round. At the end of the day, the guy leading the tournament is named Grayson Murray. He's 8 under par. Second place is either 2 or 3 under, like something way behind. I think I shot 1 or 2 over, something of that nature. It doesn't even really matter to the story. The next day, I'm on the range. I see him again, and someone comes up to him and says, hey, great round yesterday, Grayson. It was the first time I knew who the guy that I was watching was. And so I remember having this moment of just like pure relief that the guy that I watched on the range that it clearly was better than I am was Grayson Murray, the guy who ended up shooting 8 under, because it's like, okay, he's not just better than me, he's better than everybody. I'm okay. He's in his own tier. And for the rest of the season, he must have just completely blitzed the field like that 5, 6, 7 times, something in that nature. And I remember talking to some guys like, how is he not on tour yet? And the answer was, to your point, it's like, you know what? He's really fiery. He has blow up rounds. If he's not playing perfect golf, he can't grind out a score. He just has a lot of maturing to do. Pretty cool to see that he actually did it. And kind of fast forward 8 years or so, the last time I was at US Open sectionals, the guy who finished medalist was Grayson Murray, again, at 8 under par. And so I had this like really cool first full circle moment in my own career of that day, remembering, not only like how far I had come since that time, but man, Grayson has gone a long way from being the best player who wasn't as successful as he should have been that many years ago to now qualifying at the US Open and just getting it done week in, week out on tour. And of course, this year he gets the win. So that was pretty amazing to see from a golf perspective. And then just from a human perspective, like you said it, so much growth. And I think at the very least, it's really cool. It's rewarding that he was able to turn his life around in the way that he did and make the positive impact that he made on so many. Like, he led by perfect example. We've seen how many people on Twitter have shown that he reached out of the blue to them just to let them know, hey, what you're going through, you're not alone. I went through the same thing. This is what helped me. If you ever need help, I'm here for you, that sort of thing. So pretty incredible stuff to see from Grayson.
Yeah, and the bad thing is we need more characters on the PGA Tour, and he was a character, right? He had his own personality, he was his own person. He didn't fit necessarily the golf mold, right? He wasn't afraid to express himself, and he wasn't afraid to get pissed off on the golf course, and that's going to be the biggest takeaway from this is that we're just losing another personality, not just a great golfer, but another personality and somebody that was having so much impact. It's kind of heart-wrenching because I don't understand when it seemed like he had a great support system. It seemed like he had figured it out. Like, I think it just shows that sometimes you just can't judge a book by its cover. There's still people fighting those demons, even if you don't see it. And we take it. I know we take it for granted all the time here. It's just you just don't ever think that it'll come to that, especially after you feel like they've conquered it. So, yeah, there's a lot to. This is a big pill to swallow here, right? There's a lot to take away from everything that's happened, and the whole golf broadcast was kind of just that somber mood, right?
Yeah.
You could just, Nance bringing it. There's just so many good things and so many people that Webb Simpson told great stories about Grayson.
Peter Malnati was spectacular too after his round.
Yeah. And Peter even said, I didn't really know him that well. That he had just started to get to know him and stuff like that. So, you could just, and these are, I would call Peter and Webb Simpson both very, very good, genuine people, right? So to have those things to say about Grayson, I think even speaks more, speaks more to his character and stuff like that, and what he had gone through and was going through and getting better, throughout his life. So here we are. We can, it's just a weird thought that we can't, I think if you went back and listened to last week's show, you even said, Grayson Murray has the ability to show up on any leaderboard at any time. So to lose that and the withdrawing with 2 to play was a weird deal. Like, I don't understand. I think he was right on the cut line or not far off of it. If he wasn't to, I haven't even heard any speculation about it. I don't know if you have or not.
I think that's why Malnati even said to a few people, hey, can you keep an eye on him? It's a weird withdrawal. Yeah. It's strange. Obviously extremely tragic. I also think in a weird way, it's a reminder of what the tour's kind of been missing this year, in the sense that we've deviated so far from the stories about human beings and just people and getting to know the athletes, because all of the talk has been on the money and the live deal and all that stuff. So it would be really nice if we could sometime soon just get back to the stories about these players and learning about them more, getting to know them better, things of that nature.
Yeah, I think you're right. All we do is talk about the separation of the two tours, and then even from there, it's, we talk about basically another Scotty Scheffler show, right? That's pretty much what all of the talk has been, and we don't get the stories about people that maybe we used to get. I think that there's going to be a lot of good that comes from this. It's just a really tragic way for it to happen.
Yeah, and I, like I said, I think the positive that could come from it is just learning from Grayson, who led by example, reaching out to people, just be more selfless. I think the message from Harry Higgs was spectacular. So again, anybody who hasn't seen that should go check it out. With all that said, let's move into the RBC Canadian Open. Preview this a little bit. We're not going to spend too much time on it. We'll talk some one and done. You and I had a pretty good week this past week on Keegan there, so we did make some moves in that regard. Let's start with some course fit stuff. Hamilton, we're back for the first time since 2019. Do you remember anything from the last time that you took away from it that you really kind of want to play into this year, or do you just kind of want to hear about the course fit model and go from there?
Well, so I know it is going to be, a shorter only two par fives, par 70. I do know that there's a couple of really long par threes. I do, there's a lot of talk about the redo and because it has been redone. I think from the way that I understand it and the people that I've talked to, the redo was more to help the turf conditions than it was the actual layout of the golf course. The other thing I did read is that they removed a lot of bunkers around the greens and made it just fairway basically. So I think that you're going to lean into maybe, the tight lie chipping, albeit in the north. I'm going to guess it's probably perfect bent grass fairways, so the chipping shouldn't be all that difficult. But outside of that, I think that you're going to probably see a Rory domination, and then a lot of names from there of guys that maybe you don't hear about a lot. That being said, I'd love to see somebody like Corey Connors play good. I know Taylor won last year, but I think I think it's fairly narrow. Last time the rough was up, I haven't seen many reports this year.
Eric Patterson did a good breakdown of the changes. I think one meaningful change that it does seem like they added some fairway bunkers more in line with where most of the guys are actually landing the ball. So it's like a lot of the fairway bunkers were in play for members and not so much for the tour guys, and they added some in that regard. What we saw last time is actually really interesting in the sense that around the green was far and away the most predictive. So you just mentioned the fact that we might even lean more into that with more tight lies around the green, which again really emphasized the need for skill, quality of contact, things of that nature. Driving distance and putting were both well below average. So I'm curious if that's going to continue.
Yeah. Somebody was talking about, which I don't think they did, but I don't remember who. A buddy of mine told me that he was talking to somebody up there and they did like a progressive watering, right? So it's an interesting concept, and I don't think they actually are going to go through with it this year for the tour event. But basically the idea was the shorter you fly your golf ball, the firmer the fairway is. And then as you hit it further, the softer or less roll that you get, which I kind of found it interesting because sure, a guy like me is going to be able to hit it further than maybe normal, but my ball would also bound into the rough maybe a little bit more than others. So it's kind of a catch-22. I think that we talked about the progressive rough last week. Mm-hmm. I think something like this would be a pretty cool idea to see how it turned out, right? If you made if at the 200-yard marker the fairway was firmer than, let's say, the 150 marker, and then even there it was even a little softer at the 100-yard marker, like. That's a kind of a neat idea that I never really thought about before he brought it up.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that because I'm with you. I think the thing that I don't like about that is it would basically just incentivize the high hard bomb that carries as far as possible, but then it's just going to stop when it lands. And I don't know that like that's so it's weird. It's like you're basically just changing the advantage from distance to carry distance and not really doing anything else about that. So it's a weird one.
Yeah, like I said, they brought it up, and I thought it was an
Yeah.
interesting dynamic, and it's something that I'd never thought about.
I think the progressive rough is more interesting to me. It's definitely something that I like to see more. One and done. Or actually, even before we get to one and done, why don't we talk about just guys that we think are undervalued this week, whether it's based on course fit, whether it's just based on their talent level, but price on DraftKings, price in the outright market, whatever. Who stands out to you this week as being undervalued by pretty much everybody?
The first one that really stood out to me was Bud Cauley. He's shown some form, perfect golf course for him. Super cheap on DraftKings, in my opinion, especially if you're going to play Rory, right? He kind of gives you the where you can go down to him. And I thought Eric Cole also stood out at he's at 6,800. Those are the first two that I saw that really. I'm sure you'll go back to Kim. I think is at 6,800 too. So there's some value down there on the board. I think of guys that can really compete on a golf course like this, where I think you might see a few different names on the leaderboard. And with Cauley getting healthy, I want to be ahead of the curve of when he breaks out again because I think he's going to win at some point.
Yeah, I like that call. Cauley was somebody who actually I moved down a little bit manually in our projections just because it was still picking up some time from before his injury. So I just moved it to basically what he's done post-injury with a little bit of that signal from beforehand because that it still tells us about who he can be. But he still projects pretty well. In fact, he's the highest in that price range. I think he might be the highest under $6,500 in terms of top 5 odds, top 10 odds, things like that. So I like that call, and you are correct. I do have interest in Sunghyun Kim again. One of the things about this course that I think stood out to me right away is if we do have the added emphasis on around the green play, despite the fact that it's a birdie course, 22 under one last time when Rory ran away from everybody else, you get a little bit of crossover there potentially with Craig Ranch, one of those places that, again, it's a birdie fest, so people don't think to go to around the green play, and yet that's what's most predictive there. If we get a little of that aspect here, that makes Sunghyun Kim a fantastic play. Obviously, we had a wonderful week there for the second year in a row. Sunghyun Kim finished 4th there. So if that's a potential narrative this week, there are also other guys that we can go to there, just kind of overlapping with that Craig Ranch takedown that we had. But Eric Cole's another interesting call here. He has had terrible form. The thing that stands out to me about the form that makes me a little bit cautious there is that he's not just struggling in one or two areas where, if he just turns around the iron play, or if he turns around a short game, he'll be just fine. It's kind of struggled everywhere, but there's no doubt that from a pure just talent perspective, 6,800, he really stands out.
Yeah, and I think that he started to maybe show signs of breaking out of that. Of his funk a little bit. I don't think he's been able to do it for a full golf tournament yet, but I just think that he's kind of another guy that when he does figure it out, to be ahead of the game with him, with as much talent as he has, he could definitely be top 5 potential in a field like this for sure. The other guy that I'd be interested to know your take on is Tom Kim. We're not far removed from talking about him being a superstar, right? I mean, there was a point where we thought that he was going to be one of the best players on the PGA Tour. He struggled for a while. He's starting to find a little bit of form, but he hasn't been able to do it for an entire golf tournament. He plays 1 or 2 good rounds and 1 or 2 bad rounds, it seems like, every week. You have any thoughts on what Tom Kim's going to do? And do you think his talent, that we'll get back to talking to him about him as a top 20 player?
The biggest sign of encouragement is definitely what he's done off the tee the last couple of weeks, where when he was rattling off those wins early on and just playing super well early on, driving accuracy was there every single week. You could count on it completely. The putter was hot. The irons were great. So you still are going to need those spikes, but he's finally giving himself the opportunity to do so again by driving the ball accurately. So I think there may have been a little bit in there where he was like chasing distance and trying to make up a little bit of distance relative to everybody else, and that was then hurting his driving accuracy. But that sort of thing always ends up evening itself out. Seems like that's happening now. He's driving the ball quite well. So yeah, we just need to see the spikes there, but he's had great around the green weeks. He's had good putting weeks. He's had good iron weeks. It just hasn't all come together. I do think there's upside to Tom Kim this week. Here's an interesting area. Back to back in the DraftKings pricing are Adam Scott, Aaron Rai, Keith Mitchell. I love playing Adam Scott. I love playing Keith Mitchell. Both of those are in large part because they score really well. They're also fairly high event-to-event standard deviations, which means they've got that extra bit of ceiling. I don't usually like to play Aaron Rai, and yet Rai is fourth this week in our expected strokes gain projections. He is driving the ball extremely accurately. His iron play has been spectacular. We've got him estimated as the third best iron player in this field, only behind Connors and Rory. So what are your thoughts on Rai, and how does he stack up compared to the other guys in this price range to you?
So I actually, spent some time diving into Aaron Rai this week, and his iron play is really good, really impressive quality golf shots. If it comes down to that's what you're going to need at this golf course to win the golf tournament, I think that he provides that upside. And I think it's funny because you just said Connors too, and that's kind of the two guys that I was like, well, if this becomes just an iron fest, those are the two guys that I think are going to be hard to beat. Yeah. So it's just so hard because Adam Scott is more talented, right, tee to green than Aaron Rai is. Period. I mean, it's just he can just hit more shots. That doesn't necessarily mean that's going to happen at this golf course. So it's just kind of a different take. And especially if you think that those other guys around him are going to eat up his ownership, I think Aaron Rai is really good here.
Rai is available at 40-1. We have him at 3.3% to win. I don't know that I'm making that bet, but I will say this. My hope is that Rai is extremely popular on DraftKings. I would then fade him, but bet his outright almost as a hedge, but also just because I think the outright is pretty solid value based on those numbers. So he would then either be really bad chalk or he's deserving of our win odd projection there and would be a solid bet. So that's probably how I'm going to play that. What are your thoughts on one and done this week? We got the second place finish from Keegan, so we're now just barely outside of the money again. 1 or 2 good weeks. We're not just back in the money, but we're back in the race for this whole thing. So where are you thinking about going early on this week?
My first thought here was probably Fleetwood, because I think, that being said, I'm not going to be afraid that if he shows up and being very chalky, I won't be afraid to go down to like a Connors or even a Lowry who seems to have found some form. But Fleetwood probably should have won here or should have won up there, not the same golf course, but this event last year. I just think that he kind of fits the bill for this type of golf course, and he's always shown that he plays pretty good in up north. So that was my first instinct. I think Corey Connors is intriguing to me as far as my other pick. That would probably be where I would go, would be Connors or Fleetwood as of right now. But, I also want to see some projections on ownership.
Yeah, but before seeing ownership projections, the guy that stands out the most to me is Alex Noren. Third in our expected strokes gain projections. I'm definitely a little bit worried that he's going to be popular on DraftKings, but he might even be good chalk. The whole game has been good for him. He's driving the ball well, particularly accurately. I mentioned the fact that distance really wasn't predictive at all the last time they were at Hamilton. That's his biggest weakness. It's the only area that he loses strokes in, but very accurate off the tee. The iron play has been uncharacteristically great for him, significantly better than basically any other portion of his career. And the short game is just phenomenal. We have him estimated with the best short game in the field, also a great putter. So the fact that distance a little less than usual, around the green play more than usual, this is Alex Noren to a T, and he just has the form where he could compete anywhere. So I really like Noren this week. I love him for one and done. I really, really hope that he's not super popular in DraftKings, because even if it's just spread out at the top, I think he's going to rate extremely well in the GPP scores.
Yeah, and I mean he's on a pretty good run here too, right?
Yeah.
Several top 15s in a row, 10 or something, 8 or 10 top 15s in a row. Like, that's pretty impressive.
And combine that with the fact that the approach play is there, like he gained 1.6 per round with his irons at the PGA Championship. That's why I'm worried that he's going to be popular. Basically, just profiles as somebody that people are going to jump all over. He was also really, really popular at, I think it was the Wells Fargo. He was a really popular option. So, in fact, he may even have been popular at the Byron Nelson, and we just happened to have everybody else who was up near the leaderboard. So the fact that we didn't have Noren didn't kill us and didn't, or I should say, didn't keep us from having those takedowns. But man, he's been solid. I think people are going to go there again. I'm just hoping that it's spread out enough, and maybe he's expensive enough now at 9,900. Maybe people will go to the Canadian Corey Connors, for example, instead.
Yeah, I like Noren too this week. He's kind of one of those guys for me that always goes overlooked, and I'm not really sure why. Just maybe because it's just not spectacular, right? If you're not looking at just stats and you're just watching golf, he just doesn't have he just kind of goes out and goes about his business, right? He doesn't really do anything to light the world on fire and draw a lot of attention.
I think there's also an element of he doesn't have the spike weeks that some other guys have. So like he's been phenomenal, and he did have that third place finish, but other than that, at 12th, 24th, 23rd, 14th, 11th, and 19th. And if you look at his event-to-event standard deviation compared to everyone else at the top, Rory 1.2, Thigala 1.3, Fleetwood 1.2, Lowry 1.2, Noren 1.0. So he's that picture of consistency, but he's not necessarily going to get in contention. You put him in a field like this, and all of a sudden you still have that ceiling. We've got him at 3.4% to win. That's fourth best in the field behind Rory, Thigala, Fleetwood. So I think this week more than any, he's going to make sense as a one and done option. I'm fairly certain we're not going to come to some other week this year and think, oh man, I really wish we hadn't used Noren. So to me, like, he stands out as a really solid one and done play.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of how I feel about Fleetwood. I don't think we're going to I couldn't think of a spot of us saying, hey, I wish we still had Fleetwood to use either. So I think that's kind of where I leaned into Fleetwood here. So, and by the sounds of your projections, it's like, he's right. They're right there together. Yeah. So, the problem with Fleetwood is just not winning a PGA Tour event, right? Can he? I mean, is it that we'll go back to that narrative, right? Is it a false narrative, or is it he just can't win on the PGA Tour? I think it's a false narrative. He's won in Europe. I mean, it's not like he's far off. So it just seems like a week they could win. And I think, he can learn just like Xander did from a couple of weeks ago. So I think that that it kind of moves the needle for me. But, yeah, I could get behind either one of those two, I think.
I agree. I think that it sounds like we're definitely down to either Fleetwood or Noren. Let's wait until we get some ownership projections to kind of make that decision. We will discuss that further in the FTN PGA Discord chat. So if you want some one and done thoughts, that's where you will find them. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.